Hey guys, tonight we're following Hercules as he strangles a lion with golden fur under a sweltering Greek sun, sweat dripping into his eyes as he realizes this is only the first of 12 impossible tasks. You're standing there beside him, feeling the lion's immortal hide shrug off your dagger blows, while Hercules, gritting his teeth like a man who's already regretting his life choices, decides to choking hug it to death instead. Yep, this is the guy who'll later juggle three-headed dogs and wrestle river gods for fun, but right now, he's just a sweaty demigod wrestling a radioactive cat. You probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I imagine someone in Crete reading this right now, sipping ouzo like, yeah, my ancestors made this guy's life hell. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is roughly 1250 BCE, give or take a few divine interventions. Hercules, born Heracles because the Romans haven't Latinized everything yet, is fresh off accidentally murdering his wife and kids, a tragic mishap caused by Hera, who's been trying to kill him since birth. To atone, King Eurystheus dishes out 12 labors so brutal they'd make Hades himself raise an eyebrow. First up, kill the Nemean lion. Easy, right? Except its fur's bulletproof. Hercules tries stabbing it. The lion yawns. He tries clubbing it. The lion eats his sandwich. Finally, he hugs it so hard its ribs creak, a move that'd later inspire WWE wrestlers and Renaissance artists alike. Historians still argue whether the lion symbolized Hercules' struggle with his own rage or just a really inconvenient zoo escape. Either way, he skins the beast, wears its pelt like a onesie, and marches to King Eurystheus' palace, lion head flopped over his face like a bad Halloween costume. The king, upon seeing him, immediately upgrades the next labor to unwinnable nightmare mode. Nemean lion, first labor. Heracles did not have to wait long for King Eurystheus' first assignment. He instructed Heracles to kill a Nemean lion. This lion, spawned by Typhon and Echidna, was of monstrous size. He lived near the city of Nemea and devastated all the surrounding areas. Heracles bravely set out on the dangerous feat. When he arrived in Nemea, he immediately went to the mountains to find the lion's den. It was already noon when the hero reached the mountainside. Not a single living soul could be seen anywhere, neither shepherds nor farmers. All living things fled from these places in fear of the terrible lion. For a long time, Heracles searched the wooded mountainsides and gorges for the lion's lair. And finally, when the sun began to slope towards the west, Heracles found the lair in a gloomy gorge. It was in a huge cave with 2 exits. Heracles blocked one of the exits with huge stones and waited for the lion, hiding behind the stones. In the evening, when dusk was already approaching, a monstrous lion with a long braided mane appeared. Heracles drew the bowstring of his bow and shot 3 arrows into the lion one after another, but the arrows bounced off his skin. It was as hard as steel. The lion roared menacingly, and his roar rang like thunder through the mountains. Looking around in all directions, the lion stood in the gorge and searched with fierce eyes for the one who dared to shoot arrows at him. But now he saw Heracles and made a huge leap at the hero. Like lightning, Heracles' mace flashed and struck the lion's head with a thunderous blow. The lion fell to the ground, stunned by the terrible blow. Hercules rushed at the lion, wrapped his mighty arms around it, and strangled it. Having weighed the killed lion on his mighty shoulders, Hercules returned to Nemea, sacrificed to Zeus, and established the Nemean Games in memory of his first feat. When Heracles brought the lion he had killed to Mycenae, Eurystheus turned pale with fear at the sight of the monstrous lion. The king of Mycenae realized what inhuman strength Heracles possessed. He forbade him even to approach the gates of Mycenae. When Heracles brought proof of his feats, Eurystheus looked at them in horror from the high Mycenaean walls. Lernaeus' Hydra, second feat. After the first feat, Eurystheus sent Heracles to kill the Lernaean Hydra. It was a monster with the body of a serpent and 9 heads of a dragon. Like the Nemean lion, the Hydra was spawned by Typhon and Echidna. The Hydra lived in a swamp near the city of Lerna, and crawling out of its lair, destroyed entire herds and devastated the entire neighborhood. Fighting with the 9-headed Hydra was dangerous because one of its heads was immortal. Heracles set out on a journey to Lerna with Iphicles' son Aeolus. Arriving at the swamp near the city of Lerna, Heracles left Aeolus with his chariot in a nearby grove and went in search of the Hydra. He found it in a cave surrounded by swamp. Having red-hot his arrows, Heracles began to shoot them one after another at the Hydra. The Hydra was enraged by Heracles' arrows. It crawled, wriggling covered with shiny scales, from the darkness of the cave, rose menacingly on its huge tail, and wanted to rush at the hero. But the son of Zeus stepped her foot on the body and pressed it to the ground. The Hydra wrapped its tail around Heracles' legs and tried to bring him down. As an unshakable rock stood the hero, and with a swing of a heavy stick, one by one, knocked down the heads of the Hydra. Like a whirlwind, the stick whistled in the air. The Hydra heads flew off, but the Hydra was still alive. Here, Heracles noticed that the Hydra had 2 new heads growing in place of each knocked-down head. Help for the Hydra also appeared. A monstrous crayfish crawled out of the swamp and bit into Heracles' leg with its pincers. Then the hero called his friend Aeolus for help. Aeolus killed the monstrous crayfish, set fire to a part of the nearby grove, and with burning tree trunks cauterized the Hydra's necks, from which Heracles knocked off its heads with his stick. The Hydra stopped growing new heads. Weaker and weaker she resisted the son of Zeus. At last the immortal head came off the Hydra. The monstrous Hydra was defeated and collapsed dead on the ground. The winner Heracles buried its immortal head deep and piled a huge rock on it so that it could not come out again into the light. Then the great hero cut the body of the Hydra and plunged his arrows into its poisonous bile. Since then, the wounds from Heracles' arrows became incurable. With great triumph, Heracles returned to Tirinthos. But there was a new task awaiting him from Eurystheus. Stymphalian birds, the third feat. Eurystheus instructed Heracles to kill the Stymphalian birds. These birds almost turned the entire neighborhood of the Arcadian city of Stymphalis into a desert. They attacked both animals and people and tore them apart with their copper claws and beaks. But the most terrible thing was that the feathers of these birds were of hard bronze, and the birds flying up could drop them like arrows on whoever thought of attacking them. It was difficult for Heracles to fulfill this assignment of Eurystheus. The warrior Athena Pallida came to his aid. She gave Heracles 2 copper tympans forged by the god Hephaestus, and told Hercules to stand on a high hill near the forest where the Stymphalian birds were nesting, and to strike the tympans when the birds flew up, to shoot them with a bow. This is what Hercules did. Ascending the hill, he struck the tympani, and such a deafening sound went up that the birds flew up in a huge flock over the forest and began to circle over it in terror. They rained their arrow-sharp feathers on the ground, but the feathers did not hit Hercules, who was standing on the hill. The hero grabbed his bow and began to strike the birds with deadly arrows. In fear, the birds of Stymphalia soared beyond the clouds and disappeared from Heracles' eyes. The birds flew far beyond Greece to the shores of the Euxine Pontus and never returned to the neighborhood of Stymphalus. So Heracles fulfilled this commission of Eurystheus and returned to Tirinthos, but immediately he had to go on an even more difficult feat. The Caranean doe, 4th feat. Eurystheus knew that in Arcadia lived the marvelous Carianian doe, sent by the goddess Artemis to punish people. This doe was ravaging the fields. Eurystheus sent Heracles to catch it and ordered him to bring the doe alive to Mycenae. This doe was unusually beautiful. Its horns were golden and its feet were copper. Like the wind, she ran through the mountains and valleys of Arcadia, never knowing, never tired. For a whole year, Heracles pursued the Caranean doe. She ran through the mountains, across the plains, jumped over chasms, swam across rivers. The doe ran farther and farther north. The hero did not lag behind her. He pursued her without losing sight of her. Finally, Heracles reached the extreme north in pursuit of the fall, the country of the Hyperboreans and the sources of the Istra. Here the doe stopped. The hero wanted to grab her, but she slipped away and, like an arrow, ran back to the south. The chase began again. Heracles managed to catch up with the doe only in Arcadia. Even after such a long chase, she did not lose her strength. Desperate to catch the doe, Hercules resorted to his arrows that never miss. He wounded the doe with an arrow in the leg, and only then he managed to catch it. Heracles took the wonderful doe on his shoulders and wanted to carry it to Mycenae, as the angry Artemis appeared before him and said, "Did you not know, Heracles, that this doe is mine? Why have you insulted me by injuring my favorite doe? Knowest thou not that I forgive no offense? Or do you think you are more powerful than the Olympian gods?" Heracles bowed in reverence before the beautiful goddess and answered, "O great daughter of Latona, do not blame me. I have never offended the immortal gods living on the bright Olympus. I have always honored the gods with rich sacrifices and have never considered myself their equal, although I myself am the son of the thunderer Zeus. It was not of my own free will that I pursued your doe, but at the command of Eurystheus. The gods themselves commanded me to serve him, and I dare not disobey Eurystheus." Artemis forgave Heracles his guilt. The great son of Zeus, the thunderer, brought alive to Mycenae the Cyrenian doe and gave it to Eurystheus. The Erymanthian boar and the battle with the centaurs, 5th feat. After hunting the copper-footed doe for a whole year, Heracles did not rest for long. Once again, Eurystheus gave him an assignment. Heracles had to kill an Erymanthian boar. This boar, which had a monstrous power, lived on Mount Erymanthus and devastated the neighborhood of the city of Sophis. He gave no mercy to people and killed them with his huge fangs. Heracles traveled to Mount Erymanthus. On the way, he visited the wise centaur Pholus. Pholus received the great son of Zeus with honor and arranged a feast for him. During the feast, the centaur opened a big vessel with wine to treat the hero better. The fragrance of marvelous wine spread far away. The other centaurs heard the fragrance. They were terribly angry with Pholus for opening the vessel. The wine did not belong to Thal alone, but was the property of all the centaurs. The centaurs rushed to Pholus's dwelling and attacked him and Heracles in surprise, while the two of them were having a merry feast, adorning their heads with wreaths of ivy. Heracles was not afraid of the centaurs. He quickly jumped up from his bed and began throwing huge smoking heads at his attackers. The centaurs fled, and Heracles wounded them with his poison arrows. The hero pursued them all the way to Malea. There the centaurs took refuge with Heracles' friend Chiron, the wisest of the centaurs. Heracles followed them into the cave. In anger, he drew his bow, and an arrow flashed through the air and plunged into the knee of one of the centaurs. Heracles did not strike an enemy, but his friend Chiron. Great sorrow seized the hero when he saw whom he had wounded. Heracles hurried to wash and dress his friend's wound, but nothing could help. Heracles knew that the wound from an arrow poisoned by the bile of the Hydra was incurable. Chiron also knew that he was facing a painful death. In order not to suffer from the wound, he later voluntarily descended into the dark kingdom of Hades. In deep sorrow, Heracles left Chiron and soon reached Mount Erymanthus. There, in a dense forest, he found a fearsome boar and drove it out of the thicket with a shout. Heracles pursued the boar for a long time and finally drove it into the deep snow on the top of the mountain. The boar got stuck in the snow, and Heracles, throwing himself on him, tied him up and carried him alive to Mycenae. When Eurystheus saw the monstrous boar, he hid in a large bronze vessel out of fear. King Abijah's cattle yard, the sixth deed. Soon Eurystheus gave Heracles a new task. He was to clear the dung from the entire barnyard of Abgius, king of Elida, son of the radiant Helios. The sun god had given his son innumerable riches. Abgius's herds were especially numerous. Among his herds were 300 bulls with legs as white as snow. 200 bulls were red like Sidonian purple. 12 bulls dedicated to the god Helios were white like swans, and 1 bull, characterized by extraordinary beauty, shone like a star. Heracles offered Abgius to clear his entire huge cattle yard in one day, if he would agree to give him 1/10 of his herds. Abgius agreed. It seemed impossible for him to do such a job in one day. Heracles broke down the wall surrounding the cattle yard from 2 opposite sides and diverted the water of 2 rivers, the Alpheus and the Peneus, into it. The water of these rivers in one day carried away all the dung from the cattle yard, and Heracles again put up the walls. When the hero came to Abgius to demand a reward, the proud king did not give him the promised 10th part of the herds, and Heracles had to return to Tirinthos with nothing. The great hero took terrible revenge on the king of Elida. A few years later, having been freed from the service of Eurystheus, Heracles invaded Elida with a large army, defeated Abgius in a bloody battle, and killed him with his deadly arrow. After the victory, Heracles gathered his army and all the rich booty near the city of Pisa, made sacrifices to the Olympian gods, and established the Olympic Games, which have since been celebrated by all Greeks every 4 years on the sacred plain, planted with olive trees dedicated to the goddess Athena Pallada by Hercules himself. Hercules also took revenge on all the allies of Abgius. Especially the king of Pylos, Neleus, paid the price. Heracles, coming with an army to Pylos, took the city and killed Neleus and 11 of his sons. Neleus's son, Periclymenos, who was given the gift of turning into a lion, a snake, and a bee by Poseidon, the ruler of the sea, did not escape. Heracles killed him when, having turned into a bee, Periclymenos sat on one of the horses, harnessed to Heracles' chariot. Only Nestorius, the son of Neleus, survived. Subsequently, Nestorius became famous among the Greeks for his exploits and great wisdom. The Cretan Bull, 7th feat. To fulfill Eurystheus's 7th assignment, Heracles had to leave Greece and go to the island of Crete. Eurystheus instructed him to bring a Cretan bull to Mycenae. This bull was sent to King Minos of Crete, son of Europa, by Poseidon, the shaker of the earth. Minos had to sacrifice the bull to Poseidon. But Minos was sorry to sacrifice such a beautiful bull. He left him in his herd and sacrificed one of his bulls to Poseidon. Poseidon was angry with Minos and sent the bull out of the sea into a frenzy. The bull ran all over the island and destroyed everything in its path. The great hero Heracles caught the bull and tamed it. He sat on the bull's broad back and sailed it across the sea from Crete to the Peloponnese. Heracles brought the bull to Mycenae, but Eurystheus was afraid to leave Poseidon's bull in his herd and let him go free. Feeling free again, the mad bull ran across the whole Peloponnese to the north and finally ran to Attica on the Marathon field. There he was killed by the great Athenian hero Theseus. Horses of Diomedes, 8th feat. After taming the Cretan bull, Heracles, on behalf of Eurystheus, had to go to Thrace to Diomedes, king of the Bistons. This king had horses of marvelous beauty and strength. They were chained with iron chains in stalls, for no fetters could hold them. King Diomedes fed these horses human meat. He threw them to eat all the foreigners who, driven by the storm, came to his city. Heracles and his companions came to this Thracian king. He took possession of Diomedes' horses and took them to his ship. On the shore, Heracles was overtaken by Diomedes himself with his warlike bestones. Having entrusted the protection of horses to his favorite Abdera, the son of Hermes, Heracles entered the battle with Diomedes. Heracles had few companions, but still Diomedes was defeated and fell in battle. Heracles returned to the ship. How great was his despair when he saw that the wild horses had mauled his favorite Abder. Heracles arranged a lavish funeral for his favorite, poured a high hill on his grave, and next to the grave founded a city, and named it after his favorite Abdera. Heracles brought Diomedes' horses to Eurystheus, and the latter ordered to set them free. The wild horses ran away to the mountains of Lycaon, covered with dense forests, and were torn to pieces by wild beasts. Hippolyta's belt, 9th feat. The 9th feat of Heracles was his march into the land of the Amazons to fetch the belt of Queen Hippolyta. This belt was given to Hippolyta by Ares, the god of war, and she wore it as a sign of her power over all the Amazons. Eurystheus's daughter Admeta, a priestess of the goddess Hera, wanted to have this belt. To fulfill her wish, Eurystheus sent Hercules for the belt. Gathering a small group of heroes, the great son of Zeus set off on a long journey on a ship alone. Though the detachment of Heracles was small, but many glorious heroes were in this detachment, I was in it the great hero of Attica, Theseus. The heroes had a long journey ahead of them. They had to reach the farthest shores of the Euxine Pontus, as there was a country of Amazons with the capital Themyscira. On the way, Hercules and his companions came to the island of Paros, where the sons of Minos ruled. On this island, the sons of Minos killed 2 of Hercules' companions. Heracles, angered by this, immediately began a war with the sons of Minos. Many inhabitants of Paros he killed. Others, having driven them into the city, kept them under siege until the besieged sent ambassadors to Heracles and asked him to take 2 of them instead of the killed companions. Then Heracles lifted the siege and took the grandsons of Minos, Alcaeus, and Sthenelus instead of the slain. From Paros, Heracles arrived in Mysia to King Lycus, who received him with great hospitality. Suddenly, the king of the Bebrians attacked Lycus. Heracles defeated the king of the Bebrics with his troop and destroyed his capital, and gave all the land of the Bebrics to Lycus. King Lycus named this land in Heracles' honor Heraclea. After this feat, Heracles traveled further and finally arrived at the city of the Amazons, Themyscira. The fame of the exploits of the son of Zeus had long ago reached the country of the Amazons. Therefore, when Heracles' ship docked at Themyscira, the Amazons came out with the queen to meet the hero. They looked with amazement at the great son of Zeus, who stood out like an immortal god among his companions' heroes. Queen Hippolyta asked the great hero Heracles, "Glorious son of Zeus, tell me, what brings you to our city? Do you bring us peace or war?" So answered the queen Heracles, "Queen, it was not of my own accord that I came here with my army, having traveled a long way across the stormy sea. I was sent by the ruler of Mycenae, Eurystheus. His daughter Admeta wants your girdle, a gift from the god Ares. Eurystheus has commissioned me to get your girdle." Hippolyta could not refuse Heracles anything. She was ready to voluntarily give him the belt, but the great Hera, wishing to destroy Heracles, who hated her, took the form of an Amazon, intervened in the crowd, and began to persuade the warriors to attack the army of Heracles. Hera said to the Amazons, "Heracles is not telling the truth," she said to the Amazons. "He has come to you with an insidious intent. The hero wants to kidnap your queen Hippolyta and take her away as a slave to his house." The Amazons believed Hera. They took up arms and attacked Heracles' army. Aella, fast as the wind, was leading the Amazon army. She was the first to attack Heracles like a stormy whirlwind. The great hero repulsed her onslaught and turned her into flight. Aella thought to escape from the hero with a quick flight. Hercules caught up with her and struck her with his shining sword. Protoia also fell in the battle. 7 heroes from among Heracles' companions she killed with her own hand, but she did not escape the arrow of the great son of Zeus. Then 7 Amazons attacked Heracles at once. They were companions of Artemis herself. No one was their equal in the art of wielding a spear. Covered with shields, they threw their spears at Heracles, but the spears flew past this time. All of them were struck down by the hero with his stick. One by one they fell to the ground, glittering with their weapons. The Amazon Melanippe, who led the army into battle, Heracles took her prisoner, and together with her he captured Antiopa. The fearsome warriors were defeated. Their army turned to flight. Many of them fell at the hands of the heroes who pursued them. The Amazons made peace with Heracles. Hippolyta bought the freedom of the mighty Melanippe at the cost of her belt. Antiope, however, was taken away by the heroes. Heracles gave her to Theseus as a reward for his great bravery. Thus Heracles obtained Hippolyta's belt. Geryon's cows, 10th feat. Soon after returning from a campaign in the land of the Amazons, Heracles set out on a new feat. He was commissioned by Eurystheus to bring to Mycenae the cows of the great Geryon, son of Chrysaorus, and the Oceanid Caliroi. The way to Geryon was far. Heracles had to reach the westernmost edge of the earth, those places where the radiant sun god Helios descends from the sky at sunset. Heracles set out alone on a long journey. He passed through Africa, through the barren deserts of Libya, through the countries of wild barbarians, and finally reached the limits of the earth. Here he erected on both sides of the narrow sea strait 2 giant stone pillars as an eternal monument to his feat. After that, Heracles had to wander a lot more until he reached the shores of the gray ocean. In reflection, the hero sat down on the shore at the ever-noisy waters of the ocean. How could he reach the island of Erythea, where Geryon grazed his flocks? The day was already approaching evening. Here appeared the chariot of Helios, descending to the waters of the ocean. The bright rays of Helios blinded Heracles, and an unbearable scorching heat seized him. In anger, Heracles jumped up and grabbed his formidable bow, but the light Helios was not angry. He smiled at the hero. He liked the extraordinary courage of the great son of Zeus. Helios himself offered Heracles to cross to Erythea in a golden shuttle, in which the sun god sailed every evening with his horses and chariot from the western to the eastern edge of the earth to his golden palace. The happy hero boldly jumped into the golden boat and quickly reached the shores of Erythea. As soon as he landed on the island, the formidable 2-headed dog Orpho sensed him and rushed at the hero, barking. Hercules killed him with one blow of his heavy club. Orpho wasn't the only one guarding Geryon's herds. Hercules also had to fight with Geryon's shepherd, the giant Eurytion. The son of Zeus quickly coped with the giant and drove Geryon's cows to the seashore, where the golden canoe of Helios stood. Geryon heard the lowing of his cows and went to the herd. When he saw that his dog Orpho and the giant Eurytion had been killed, he chased after the thief of the herd and overtook him on the seashore. Geryon was a monstrous giant. He had 3 torsos, 3 heads, 6 arms, and 6 legs. He used 3 shields to cover himself during the battle, and he threw 3 huge spears at the enemy at once. Hercules had to fight with such a giant, but the great warrior Pallas Athena helped him. As soon as Hercules saw him, he immediately shot his deadly arrow at the giant. An arrow pierced the eye of one of Geryon's heads. The first arrow was followed by the second, followed by the third. Hercules menacingly swung his all-destroying club like lightning. The hero of Geryon struck it, and the 3-bodied giant fell to the ground like a lifeless corpse. Hercules transported Geryon's cows across the stormy ocean from Erythea in Helios's golden canoe and returned the canoe to Helios. Half of the feat was over. There was still a lot of work ahead. It was necessary to bring the bulls to Mycenae. Hercules drove cows across Spain, through the Pyrenees Mountains, through Gaul and the Alps, through Italy. In the south of Italy, near the city of Rhegium, one of the cows escaped from the herd and sailed across the strait to Sicily. King Eric, the son of Poseidon, saw her there and took the cow into his herd. Hercules searched for a cow for a long time. Finally, he asked the god Hephaestus to guard the herd, and he crossed to Sicily and found his cow in King Eric's herd. The king did not want to return her to Hercules. Hoping for his strength, he challenged Hercules to single combat. The winner was to be rewarded with a cow. Eryx couldn't face an opponent like Hercules. The son of Zeus squeezed the king in his mighty arms and strangled him. Hercules returned with the cow to his herd and drove it on. On the shores of the Ionian Sea, the goddess Hera unleashed rabies on the entire herd. The mad cows scattered in all directions. Only with great difficulty did Hercules catch most of the cows already in Thrace, and finally brought them to Eurystheus in Mycenae. Eurystheus sacrificed them to the great goddess Hera. Kerber, the 11th feat. As soon as Hercules returned to Tiryns, Eurystheus sent him to the feat again. This was the 11th feat that Hercules had to perform in the service of Eurystheus. Hercules had to overcome incredible difficulties during this feat. He was supposed to descend into the gloomy, terrifying underground kingdom of Hades and bring the guardian of the underworld, the terrible infernal dog Kerber, to Eurystheus. Kerber had 3 heads, snakes were writhing on his neck, and his tail ended in a dragon's head with a huge mouth. Hercules went to Laconia and descended through the gloomy abyss at Tanar into the darkness of the underworld. At the very gates of the kingdom of Hades, Hercules saw the heroes Theseus and Periphoe, king of Thessaly, rooted to the rock. They were so punished by the gods because they wanted to kidnap his wife Persephone from Hades. Theseus pleaded to Hercules, "O great son of Zeus, set me free. You see my torment. You alone can rid me of them." Hercules stretched out his hand to Theseus and freed him. When he wanted to free Periphoe, the earth trembled, and Hercules realized that the gods did not want his release. Hercules submitted to the will of the gods and went on into the darkness of eternal night. Hercules was introduced to the underworld by Hermes, the messenger of the gods, the guide of the souls of the dead, and the companion of the great hero was the beloved daughter of Zeus, Pallas Athena. When Hercules entered the kingdom of Hades, the shadows of the dead scattered in horror. Only the shadow of the hero Meleager did not flee at the sight of Hercules. She pleaded with the great son of Zeus, "O great son of Zeus, set me free. You see my torment. You alone can rid me of them." Hercules stretched out his hand to Theseus and freed him. When he wanted to free Periphoe, the earth trembled, and Hercules realized that the gods did not want his release. Hercules submitted to the will of the gods and went on into the darkness of eternal night. Hercules was introduced to the underworld by Hermes, the messenger of the gods, the guide of the souls of the dead, and the companion of the great hero was the beloved daughter of Zeus, Pallas Athena. When Hercules entered the kingdom of Hades, the shadows of the dead scattered in horror. Only the shadow of the hero Meleager did not flee at the sight of Hercules. She pleaded with the great son of Zeus, "O great Hercules, I pray you for one thing in memory of our friendship. Have mercy on my orphaned sister, the beautiful Deianira. She was left defenseless after my death. Take her as your wife, great hero. Be her protector." Hercules promised to fulfill his friend's request and followed Hermes further. The shadow of the terrible Gorgon Medusa rose up to meet Hercules. She menacingly stretched out her copper arms and waved her golden wings. Snakes moved on her head. The fearless hero grabbed his sword, but Hermes stopped him with the words, "Don't grab your sword, Hercules. After all, it's just a disembodied shadow. She's not threatening to kill you." Hercules saw many horrors on his way. Finally, he appeared before the throne of Hades. The ruler of the kingdom of the dead and his wife Persephone looked with delight at the great son of the thunderer Zeus, who fearlessly descended into the kingdom of darkness and sorrow. Majestic and calm, he stood before the throne of Hades, leaning on his huge club, wearing a lion's skin draped over his shoulders, and with a bow on his shoulders. Hades graciously greeted the son of his great brother Zeus, and asked what made him leave the light of the sun and descend into the realm of darkness. Hercules replied, bowing before Hades, "O Lord of the souls of the dead, great Hades, do not be angry with me for my request, Almighty. You know that it was not of my own free will that I came to your kingdom, and it is not of my own free will that I will ask you. Allow me, Lord Hades, to take your three-headed dog Kerber to Mycenae. Eurystheus ordered me to do this, whom I serve at the behest of the bright Olympian gods." Hades replied to the hero, "I will grant your request, son of Zeus, but you must subdue Kerber without weapons. If you tame him, then I'll let you take him to Eurystheus." Hercules searched for Kerber for a long time in the underworld. Finally, he found it on the shores of Acheron. Hercules wrapped his arms, strong as steel, around Kerber's neck. The dog of Hades howled menacingly. The whole underground kingdom was filled with his howl. He tried to escape from the embrace of Hercules, but the hero's powerful arms tightened around Kerber's neck. Kerber wrapped his tail around the hero's legs, and the dragon's head bit into his body with its teeth, but all in vain. Mighty Hercules squeezed his neck harder and harder. Finally, the half-strangled dog of Hades fell at the hero's feet. Hercules tamed him and led him from the kingdom of darkness to Mycenae. Kerber was afraid of the daylight. He was covered with cold sweat. Poisonous foam dripped from his 3 mouths to the ground. Wherever a drop of foam fell, poisonous herbs grew. Hercules led Kerber to the walls of Mycenae. The cowardly Eurystheus was horrified at one glance at the terrible dog. Almost on his knees, he begged Hercules to take Kerber back to the kingdom of Hades. Hercules complied with his request and returned his terrible guardian Kerber to Hades. Apples of the Hesperides, the 12th feat. The most difficult feat of Hercules in the service of Eurystheus was his last, the 12th feat. He had to go to the great Titan Atlas, who holds the firmament on his shoulders, and get 3 golden apples from his gardens, which were looked after by Atlas's daughters, Hesperides. These apples grew on a golden tree grown by the goddess of the earth Gaia, as a gift to the great Hera on her wedding day with Zeus. To accomplish this feat, it was necessary, first of all, to find out the way to the gardens of the Hesperides, guarded by a dragon who never closed his eyes to sleep. No one knew the way to the Hesperides and Atlas. Hercules wandered for a long time through Asia and Europe. He passed through all the countries that he had passed before on the way to Geryon's cows. Everywhere Hercules asked about the way, but no one knew him. In his search, he went to the farthest north, to the river Eridanus, which is always rolling its stormy, boundless waters. On the shores of Eridanus, beautiful nymphs greeted the great son of Zeus with honor, and gave him advice on how to find the way to the Hesperides gardens. Hercules was supposed to attack the prophetic sea elder Nereus by surprise when he came ashore from the depths of the sea, and learn from him the way to the Hesperides. Except for Nereus, no one knew this path. Hercules searched for Nemeus for a long time. Finally, he managed to find Nereus on the seashore. Hercules attacked the sea god. The struggle with the sea god was difficult. To free himself from the iron embrace of Hercules, Nereus took all kinds of forms, but still did not let go of his hero. Finally, he tied up the tired Nereus, and in order to gain freedom, the sea god had to reveal to Hercules the secret of the way to the gardens of the Hesperides. Having learned this secret, the son of Zeus released the sea elder and set off on a long journey. He had to go through Libya again. Here he met the giant Antaeus, the son of Poseidon, the god of the seas, and the goddess of the earth Gaia, who gave birth to him, nursed and raised him. Antaeus forced all the travelers to fight him, and all those whom he defeated in the struggle, mercilessly killed. The giant demanded that Hercules fight him too. No one could defeat Antaeus in single combat without knowing the secret of where the giant got more and more new powers during the struggle. The secret was this. When Antaeus felt that he was beginning to lose his strength, he touched the earth, his mother, and his powers were renewed. He drew them from his mother, the great goddess of the earth. But as soon as they lifted Anthea off the ground and lifted him into the air, his powers disappeared. Hercules and Antheus fought for a long time. He knocked him to the ground several times, but it only increased Anthea's strength. Suddenly, during the struggle, the mighty Hercules lifted Anthea high into the air, and the sun of Gaia's strength ran out, and Hercules strangled him. Then Hercules went and came to Egypt. There, tired of the long journey, he fell asleep in the shade of a small grove on the banks of the Nile. The king of Egypt, the son of Poseidon, and the daughter of Epaph-Lysianassa, Busiris, saw Hercules sleeping and ordered the sleeping hero to be tied up. He wanted to sacrifice Hercules to his father Zeus. There had been a crop failure in Egypt for 9 years. The soothsayer Phrasius, who came from Cyprus, predicted that the crop failure would stop only if Busiris sacrificed a foreigner to Zeus every year. Busiris ordered the capture of the soothsayer Phrasius and was the first to sacrifice him. Since then, the cruel king sacrificed to the thunderer all the foreigners who came to Egypt. Hercules was also brought to the altar, but the great hero tore the ropes with which he was bound and killed Busiris himself and his son Amphidamanthes at the altar. This is how the cruel king of Egypt was punished. Hercules had to face many more dangers on his way until he reached the edge of the earth, where the great Titan Atlas stood. The hero looked in amazement at the mighty Titan, who held the entire firmament on his broad shoulders. "Oh, the great Titan Atlas!" Hercules addressed him. "I am the son of Zeus, Hercules. Eurystheus, king of the gold-rich Mycenaeans, sent me to you. Eurystheus commanded me to get from you 3 golden apples from the golden tree in the gardens of the Hesperides." "I will give you 3 apples, son of Zeus," Atlas replied, "and while I am taking care of them, you must take my place and hold the firmament on your shoulders." Hercules agreed. He took the place of Atlas. An incredible weight fell on the shoulders of the son of Zeus. He exerted all his strength and held the firmament. The weight weighed terribly on Hercules's mighty shoulders. He bent under the weight of the sky. His muscles bulged like mountains. Sweat covered his entire body from exertion. But superhuman strength and the help of the goddess Athena gave him the opportunity to hold the firmament until Atlas returned with 3 golden apples. Returning, Atlas told the hero, "Here are 3 apples, Hercules. If you want, I'll take them to Mycenae myself, and you hold the vault of heaven until I return. Then I'll take your place again." Hercules understood Atlas's cunning. He realized that the Titan wanted to be completely free from his hard work, and he used cunning against the cunning. "Okay, Atlas, I agree. Just let me make myself a pillow first, and I'll put it on my shoulders so that the firmament doesn't weigh them down so terribly." Atlas stood back in his place and shouldered the weight of the sky. Hercules picked up his bow and quiver of arrows, took his club and golden apples, and said, "Goodbye, Atlas. I held the vault of heaven while you went to get the apples of the Hesperides, but I don't want to carry the whole weight of the sky on my shoulders forever." With these words, Hercules left the Titan, and again Atlas had to hold the firmament on his mighty shoulders as before. Hercules returned to Eurystheus and gave him the golden apples. Eurystheus presented them to Hercules, and he presented apples to his patroness, the great daughter of Zeus Athena Pallas. Athena returned the apples to the Hesperides so that they would remain in the gardens forever. After his 12th feat, Hercules was released from the service of Eurystheus. Now he could return to sevenfold Thebes. But the son of Zeus did not stay there long. New exploits awaited him. He gave his wife Megara to his friend Iolaus as a wife, and he went back to Tiryns. But not only victories awaited him, but also grave troubles awaited Hercules, as the great goddess Hera still pursued him.